Droids were omnipresent in the Star Wars universe, a consequence of having had millennia to spread throughout the Republic. Views on them were mixed, to put it lightly. Some beings were enthusiastic supporters of droid production, while others detested them, like a certain Mandalorian we're all surely familiar with. The CIS's use of a droid army in the Clone Wars served only to radicalize many of these positions. Traumatic experiences with separatist battle droids led many beings to develop anti-droid prejudices, and the war intensified existing anti-droid sentiments across the galaxy. In this video, we're going to be discussing these anti-droid sentiments in detail and the worlds on which hatred for droids was prevalent.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
It's impossible to overstate how heavily droids were ingrained into the culture of the Republic. By the time of the Clone Wars, entire planets had been transformed into vast factory complexes dedicated to the production of droids, with the most notable mech worlds including Telti and Mechas 3. They churned out millions, if not billions of droids on a daily basis. These droids would serve on worlds across the galaxy, working as household servants, mechanics, research assistants, translators, diplomatic attachés, industrial workers, manual laborers, and, of course, soldiers. They were nearly as prevalent as computers themselves. But there was a dark side to all of this. Droids were slaves, after all. Legally, they were wholly owned property of their organic masters, despite being sentient in their own right. While this wasn't really a concern on the wealthier worlds of the core, there were many in the galaxy, especially on the Rim, who were rubbed the wrong way by this, understandably. Additionally, there were also those who hated droid labor for the opposite reason. There were a fair few anti-droid basket cases who believed that droids were responsible for taking jobs away from organics, destroying organic cultures, and/or being poised to quote-unquote replace organics. These ideas were widespread enough to have seen representation in groups such as the Organization for Organic Purity, which campaigned for the outlawing of droid production. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there were a fair few droids rights groups as well, who fought the droid industry for totally different reasons. Groups in this category included the Coalition of Automaton Rights Activists, who were largely moderate and fought for legal rights for droids, and the Mechanical Liberation Front, radicals who regularly participated in industrial sabotage in the pursuit of droid rights. While these groups were of differing ideologies, both would have been staunchly opposed to the CIS droid army, violently so in the case of MLF and the OOP. These groups didn't exactly control any planets or anything, but they do exemplify why anti-droid sentiments were a thing. Most members of mainstream Republic society who maintained anti-droid sentiments did so for these reasons. During the Clone Wars, the CIS met stiff resistance on these anti-droid worlds, as the locals weren't exactly keen on the presence of a droid army. The CIS intensified anti-droid sentiments in general, as you might expect, especially on worlds that suffered at the hands of the droid army. As a quick tangent, the Confederacy had several galactic-scale organic units to deploy in the case that this became a serious problem. The Nemoidian Gunnery Battalions, Nemoidian Irregulars, Korrivar Fusiliers, and Gossam Commandos were all used as alternatives to battle droids on droid-unfriendly worlds, as, of course, were local planetary security forces. None of these units were particularly large, however, so the Confederacy deployed them sparingly. Furthermore, as there was plenty of prejudice against those three species as well due to their association with certain corporations, this strategy wasn't always effective either. A number of species or local populations had their own unique reasons for hating droids, apart from the more widespread ones. Members of species which glorified strength or martial skill above all, like the Rhodians or Trandoshans, were prone to hate droids due to their seemingly unearned strength and skill. Interestingly, the same can't be said for members of species that prized intelligence above all, despite the fact that droids outcompeted them in most respects as well. Clearly, most members of those species were smart enough to not put too much emphasis on lightsaber measuring. Some worlds were naturally inhospitable to droids, and thus, local cultures that developed there were less dependent and less accepting of droids. This primarily included planets like Morja and Genarius, which were constantly racked by fearsome ion storms. Those sorts of conditions were usually pretty inhospitable for organics as well, but oftentimes organics set up shop there anyway, and those that did became less dependent on droid technology due to its unreliability in such environments. Naturally, this provided a bit of a new perspective on the role of droids in the greater galaxy as well. Additionally, some local populations had intensely naturalistic cultures. Species with these tendencies included the Sand People and the Saurians, of whom both viewed high technology as an offense to the natural states of their homeworlds, and thus shunned droid technology. The Saurians actually rejected an offer to join the Republic over this issue, as they believed that integration with the Republic would result in inevitable technological development on Saria, something most of the population wished to avoid. Not every species saw technological advancement as a good thing after all, and it should be said that many of those who didn't had very valid reasons. In the case of the Saurians, they just wanted to preserve the natural beauty of their homeworld, and who can blame them? Of course, in the case of Saria, it can't be said that the droid army was particularly concerned about fighting there. Since the Saurians had little technology, CIS forces absolutely massacred them when they invaded in 22 BBY. As spider droids lay waste to the Saurian countryside, Gossam commandos assassinated their way through the planet's government, paving the way for legions of battle droids to crush all local resistance. Those Saurians who survived undoubtedly hated droids even more after this, of course. This leads us into another major reason for why some worlds were skeptical of droids: negative experiences. Many planets experienced droid revolutions, invasions of droid armies, and other traumatic droid-related experiences over the course of their histories, which often left lasting cultural scars. In general, these sorts of events serve to bolster anti-droid sentiments. For example, the Great Droid Revolution, which occurred about 4,000 years before the Clone Wars, led to such a dramatic increase in anti-droid sentiment that droid technology as a whole actually ended up losing centuries of technological progress. In some cases, negative experiences with droids just made cultures more cautious of droids instead of outright bigoted. This was the case with the Gungans of Naboo. Understandably, they became distrusting of droids after the Battle of Naboo, especially combat models. While neither they nor their human neighbors became explicitly anti-droid after the battle, they did increase their military's emphasis on weapons with EMP capabilities. The threat of future droid invasions drove the advancement of Gungan society as it entered a new age after the battle. Gungan warriors became quite proficient in combat against droids, and if the Confederacy had attempted a second invasion of Naboo, they would have been in for a bloodbath, or rather a coolant bath. Of course, there were also cases in which bad experiences with droids did lead to extreme anti-droid sentiments as well. Bakura was a good example of this. Originally, Bakura was quite reliant on droids. It was founded as a mining colony in 150 BBY and employed labor droids for all manner of tasks. However, the colony endured a droid revolution within weeks of the settlement's establishment, sparking a bloody conflict in which 40% of the planet's population perished. The colonists eventually won the battle against their droids, but the revolution still left some deep scars on Bakuran culture. Bakura became one of the most institutionally anti-droid planets in the galaxy, outlawing the development of droid technology entirely. Possession of droids required multiple permits and explicit government permission on Bakura, and outsiders had to follow strict laws when it came to bringing droids onto the planet. The Bakurans were stringent enough in their anti-droid stances that even Count Dooku refrained from bringing in droids to guard his personal stronghold on Bakura. General Grievous, however, was less respectful of these customs, as shown by his droid-led invasion of Bakura in 22 BBY. So that's our look at anti-droid sentiments and how it affected the CIS droid army. But what do you think? Are you a Chad droid rights supporter, or do you want to keep the restraining bolts on? Spam the comments below with Roger Roger, either way. And just before you run off to the next suggested video, guys, make sure you check out some of our links in the description below, including our new channel called The Braved, where we go all through history to check out some of the most badass individuals of all different eras. And if you're more into music, we also have our Relax Jack music channel, where we use a lot of the music posted there on the videos posted here. And also, if you do want to get access to a behind the scenes Discord server where you can chat to myself and the team who makes these videos, as well as some exclusive content on the actual Patreon, make sure you consider donating there. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on our Geetsly's gaming network and our Geetsly's Discord. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.